Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Is I'm audible to you?
Yes. I'm so sorry. I don't know what's happening. There's some problem with the link, or I don't know
No
what
issue.
is the issue.
No issue,
Yeah.
sir. No issue. No issue. Now we have a most eminent speaker for last session of the FDP, Mr. Kundan Kumar Burnwal ji. Mr. Kundan Kumar Burnwal is a distinguished climate change mitigation policy professional with over 15 years of extensive experience in the development, implementation, and evaluation of projects related to forestry, climate change, carbon markets, and MRV measurements, reporting, and verification, and sustainability. Currently serving as a senior advisor at GIZ, German Development Corporation, India. Mr. Burnwal leads critical works on carbon markets, climate change mitigation, and forestry. His contribution extends beyond national borders, and he also holds the position of Speaker of the Environment Working Groups of the TUVOS Sector Network, Transport, Environment, Energy, and Water in Asia. Established in Bonn, Germany in 2002, this platform facilitates professional exchange and cooperation among GIZ experts in Asia and globally, further reflecting his relationship in environmental sector. Mr. Banwal has made a significant contribution to international climate action frameworks. He is the author and lead developer of an internationally approved REDD plus methodology, reducing emission from deforestation and forest degradation. The first such methodology originating from the South Asia region. Additionally, he has successfully spearheaded several clean development mechanism (CDM) and voluntary carbon market projects across various sectors. His academics and research endeavors include the authorship of the book titled Air Pollution Abatement Through Trees and Subsequent Greenbelt Development in 2013, which highlights innovative strategies and addressing air pollution through Greenbelt Initiative. Before joining GIZ, Mr. Banwal gained valuable experience at the Amity Institute of Global Warming and Ecological Studies and the National Environmental Engineering Research Institute, NERI, where he worked in the Environmental Impact and Risk Assessment Division. Mr. Kundan Kumar Banwal holds a master degree in environmental management from Asia Premier Forestry Institute, the Forest Research Institute, FRI Dehradun, India. His comprehensive technical knowledge, strategic vision, and leadership in environmental policy and climate change mitigation makes him an influential figure in the global sustainability landscape. I welcome you, sir, on the behalf of IPS Academy Civil Engineering Department. Kindly enlighten us with your knowledge. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Swati Srivastava. I have never heard such a long introduction of myself in the recent past. Thank you so much. Uh, and I must thank Dr. Devyanshi Jagwani for inviting me and reaching out to me to be able to share my insights at this August event. And I'm happy to be here. And with that, I would like to begin. I'm so sorry for the technical glitch. I have shared my presentation with Dr. Jagmani. I would request you to please share the screen and I will move forward with my presentation. So in the meantime, I will begin. Um, I am very briefly, I'm Kundan Burnwal and I'm Senior Advisor and Deputy Project Director at GIZ India. And GIZ, before I get into the details of the presentation, I wanted to very briefly talk to you about what GIZ is. GIZ is a federal enterprise of the German government. We work on behalf of the government. We work on behalf of the government of India, government of Germany in the countries we work. And here I primarily look at climate change mitigation, climate policy, and climate finance, which includes carbon markets. Yeah, and title of the presentation is Climate Change Impacts and Implications. And I'm going to talk about it in general, but I will also very specifically get into the Indian context. And what kind of actions is the government of India taking to address climate change in impacts, climate change impacts? Yeah. So very briefly again, I'm sure many of you have been hearing about climate change from various media, including uh, newspapers, articles, videos, everywhere else. It is happening as we speak. It is leading to multiple impacts. It's affecting economy. It's affecting social life. It's affecting everybody's life. But it's now no more a distant reality. It is happening as we speak. Yeah. And with that, we move on to the next slide. And I am very briefly going to talk about the science behind it. The science behind it, and the science is about global warming. I'm sure many of you present in this August gathering already know it, but for those who are a little less informed, I wanted to inform you that it is about the greenhouse gas effect, which happens as a result of the short ultraviolet rays that comes from the sun, warms up the earth and the atmosphere, and then the greenhouse gases which are present in our atmosphere, they absorb, they do not let it pass, and they re-emit back into the atmosphere, as a result of which warming happens. And this warming leads to what is called climate change. And this is primarily because of the fact that we have anthropogenic emissions, the human man-made emissions uh, that leads to greenhouse gas effect and global warming. With that, I come to the 7 greenhouse gases. To the next slide, Dr. Jagwani. Yes, 7 greenhouse gases. These are the most potent greenhouse gases, and as has been mentioned by the IPCC, which is Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And these are carbon dioxide, methane, sulfur hexafluoride, nitrous oxide, nitrogen trifluoride, hydrofluorocarbons, and perfluorocarbons. Now, uh, maybe you will have to click once again. Uh, Dr. Jagmani, can you click once again, please? Yes. Yes. Now, what is important for all of us here is to understand the global warming potential. What is global warming potential? It is amount of warming a gas causes over a period of time. And the global warming potential for carbon dioxide is 1. As a result, every other greenhouse gas that you see on the screen talks about global warming potential in terms of carbon dioxide equivalent. E is equivalent. That's why, for example, methane has a global warming potential of 28. So 1 ton of methane which is emitted causes a global warming which would be caused by almost 28 tons of carbon dioxide. Similarly, HFCs and PFCs have very high global warming potential, and hence saving or reducing emissions of HFCs or PFCs leads to reducing the global warming potential from the carbon dioxide equivalent perspective. Moving on, I very quickly wanted to talk to you about the global climate policy landscape. It is important to understand the global climate policy landscape. In 1988, about 36 years back, uh, an intergovernmental panel on climate change was established. This was established by World Meteorological Organization and United Nations Environment Program. And this is an objective platform which provides scientific information on climate change. And it also publishes every 6 to 7 years an assessment report, which serves as an objective information on climate change and informs the policymakers of what is happening on that front. Next big milestone was in 1992 during the UN Earth Summit, when uh, what is called the UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, was established, and it was a framework for international cooperation to combat climate change. 197 countries in the world are party to it, and they meet annually every year, mostly in November and December, to negotiate how are they going to jointly address the impacts of climate change. Next big milestone was 1997. It was at COP3 in Kyoto, Japan, where a protocol was signed, which was famously called the Kyoto Protocol. And this is where the global community agreed that there needs to be flexible market-based mechanisms to address climate change. And there were three market-based mechanisms: clean development mechanism, joint implementation, and international emissions uh, reduction programs. And these programs were uh, came into existence because the global community said that it is the developed countries that are responsible for the global warming that is happening. So sorry, it's my phone, right? I'm speaking via phone, so there are calls coming. So in 1997, it was the developed countries that were given target to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions by an absolute of 5%. So if, for example, and this was average across all the developed countries. Germany, for instance, had an emission reduction target of 9.6%. Yeah. And as a result of which there were developed countries which had to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, whereas the developing countries had no such target, as a result of which a market mechanism was established. And this market mechanism was led to development of clean green projects in developing countries which did not have targets. And then in 2015, a Paris Agreement was signed, where which was signed to ensure that the global average temperature increase remains well below 2 degrees centigrade, and as a result of which, uh, yes, as a result of which, all the countries in the world were expected to come up with what is called nationally determined contributions. And India also in 2015 came up with what is called nationally determined contributions, and I'll talk about it in subsequent slides. Then one major milestone was in 2021 when the countries came together, and the whole world the whole world was intending to talk about uh, uh, reducing the fossil fuel consumption. And Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, which talks about market mechanisms, rules of that Article 6 were laid down. Moving on to the next slide. In 2020, in 2024, this year, Dr. Jagmani, can you please move to the next slide? COP29 happened only very recently, where Article 6 of the Paris Agreement was finalized, and climate finance. There was a lot of discussion on climate finance that needs to come from the developing world, and they have agreed to provide a huge amount, about 300 billion, to the developing countries in developing countries. Oops, developing countries. So this has been the international response. So climate change is actually happening, and it's not something that something that can only be spoken about. Yeah, it doesn't affect me. It affects everybody. It is a transboundary problem. Emission reductions happening here can also impact other countries, and emissions happening here can impact other countries and people living in other countries, whereas emissions happening in other countries can also impact us. And that brings me to the impact overview. To the next slide, please. As I said, in Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is an objective platform which provides information on climate change globally, they came up with what is called the sixth assessment report that was released in 2021-22. And it stated that the global average surface temperature has already increased by 1.1 degrees centigrade above the pre-industrial levels. And this has been primarily a phenomena that has happened of late. No, last few decades has been the warmest on record. Without significant reductions to emissions, global temperatures could safely rise between 1.5 to 2.5 degrees by the end of the century. And this will have significant impact on various things like ecosystems. It was also going to significantly impact food security, because if temperatures are going to rise, the cropping patterns will have to change, the ecosystems will shift north or south depending upon the temperatures in the areas. And then it is also going to affect water availability and health significantly. Moving on to the next slide. Now, climate change, I think we all need to understand what it is and how is it affecting India. It refers to long-term alterations in temperature, precipitation, wind patterns, and other aspects of the Earth's climate system. Now, there's a difference. Weather is not climate. Climate change is a long process. It happens over a long period of time. We are talking about climate change that is happening slowly and steadily. Weather, weather is what happens at a given point of time. The weather today is very sunny. It's very nice. But we don't say the climate today is very nice. It's weather is today, now, but climate is the climate over a longer duration of time in a given of a given space. In India, climate change is not only a scientific reality, but is also a pressing issue with far-reaching implications across all the three triple bottom lines, as we call it: environmental, social, and economic dimensions. I must say, it is also changing the way the way the governance framework works in this country. Earlier, it was not my prerogative as a forest department to think about water. But these days, the forest department also has to think about water, and not only the water resources department of the state, right? So it is also changing the way the governance framework is working in this country. India is also very unique in comparison to many other countries, primarily because of its geography, because of its large population. We are the most populous country in the world, and we have diverse ecosystems. At one side, we have the desert. On the other side of the country, we have the highest rainfall that happens in the world. Yeah. At one side, we have the mountains. The other side, we have the ocean. So the diverse ecosystems makes it even more vulnerable to climate change, and the more as a result of which India as a country needs to actively think about the climate change impacts and needs to take appropriate action to reduce its impacts on the lives of people and India in general. Moving on to the next slide. Uh, I wanted to talk about key aspects of climate change in India. And as I said, the temperatures are rising. I'm sure many of you must have visited Bangalore. Bangalore as a city used to be very cold. Like it used to be used to have a cooler climate. During the summers, you would still need a light blanket when you would go off to sleep. But these days you need air conditioning, right? So the average temperatures in India have risen approximately by only 0.7 degrees centigrade between in one last century. But this 0.7 degrees centigrade change is resulting in changes in cropping patterns. As I said, ecosystems are not functioning at its best by providing ecosystem services. that they should be providing temperatures, and there are projections that says that by the end of this century, the temperature increase will be anywhere between 2.4 to 4.4 degrees centigrade. Centigrade, and this is huge. This is huge. This temperature difference is uh, over uh, over the entire span of the year is a huge difference. And the monsoon patterns have also dramatically changed. 70% of India's annual rainfall are becoming increasingly erratic. I'm sure you've seen rainfall earlier used to have a longer duration with intermittent rainfall evenly spread during the monsoon season. But these days, the monsoons have reduced in their time duration, and and yeah, instead of happening for 3 months, it now happens for 20 days. But the entire rain happens in those 20 days, leading to floods. While also there are long dry spells which exacerbates the drought conditions, leading to poor farm yield. And also, one important thing that you must have observed is extreme weather events, which has now become very frequent. Earlier, you would hear, okay, cyclones are happening once in 5 years. Now, cyclones are happening every year. Uh, and as we speak, a few weeks back, there was a cyclone in uh, Chennai, right? So, and then there are heavy rainfall events which are also happening. There are all these extreme weather events, the frequency and the severity has dramatically increased, resulting in loss in property, loss in life, and all those aspects to it as well. Yeah, another slide on key aspects. I wanted to talk about the glacial retreat in the Himalayas, which threatens water availability for millions and increases the risk of GLOF, which is glacial lake outburst floods. I'm sure you've heard about it. Then the rising sea levels. See, India as a country has the longest coastline, right? We have the east coast and the west coast, and there are so many large cities on the coast, like Chennai, like Calcutta, like Mumbai. All these cities are at the risk of getting submerged in due course of time due to increasing rising sea levels and storm surges. Projections suggest that a sea level rise of about 40 to 63 centimeters by the end of the century. And there are estimates by IPCC which says that some of these cities will completely be submerged if the sea levels are going to rise. Uh, Another important element in terms of climate change impacts is the agricultural impacts. See, no matter what we say, we are a country that has reached the moon, and but we still have a huge population in the country who's dependent on agriculture. It is the climate change has significantly reduced yield of various crops due to changes in temperature and precipitation, and increase the risks of pest outbreaks and soil degradation. I'm sure you must have heard that the government of India has already taken a pledge and a target of reducing land degradation as per United Nations Convention on Combating Desertification. The government of India has said that by 2030, which is not very far, 6 years will fly by in a wink. There are in 6 years, the government of India wants to ensure that we as a country become a land degradation neutral country. That is, there is no degradation of land happening whatsoever. And that's a very difficult target, and which essentially means that we have to ensure that the climate change is not going to uh, is not going to degrade the existing lands in the country. And then there are health implications. Rising temperature and air pollution contribute to heat related illness and respiratory problems. And changing weather patterns also expand the range of vector borne diseases like malaria and dengue. And this, as I said, the changes in uh, climate is increasing the uh, hot and humid span within the given year, as a result of which it becomes very conducive for vector-borne diseases to stay around for a longer period of time. Moving on to the next slide, uh, let's look at the causes. We looked at the impact. Let's look at the causes. Very briefly, I'm sure many of you already know that India, though as a country, keeps saying that we need to increase our forest and tree cover. Uh, uh, there has been a significant loss of tree and forest in the country for various reasons, like agriculture, urbanization, and infrastructure projects that we have. Uh, I think we undermine the presence of forest and tree cover a lot in this country. Everywhere else, I think primarily in developed countries, there's a lot of uh, yeah, focus or the prominence given to forest and tree cover. But of course, we are a developing country. We need to develop. I'm not saying that urbanization is not needed, infrastructure projects are not needed, but we need to ensure that these projects do not lead to too much of forest deforestation, because the carbon sequestration capacity goes down. Then there are greenhouse gas emissions. We in the world as a country is the third largest emitter, and I think very soon we'll become the second largest emitter in terms of greenhouse gases. And this is for various reasons, including coal-based power plants, but other industrial activities and the urbanization and the transportation and all of that is related to it. As I said, these are anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions that happens that leads to global warming and in turn causes climate change. And then there is urbanization, rapid urban growth. As we say that 70% of India is yet to uh, urbanize. A lot of people are moving to urban areas, which will lead to more consumption and more waste generation and also heat island effects that is going to happen. So I think we need to develop, but we need to develop mindfully, ensuring that development does not lead to these aspects of climate change. Okay, moving on to the impacts in India. Uh, I think, as I said, we are a country with a coastline of 7,500 kilometers, and many coastal cities are increasingly vulnerable to sea level rise, and cyclones are becoming more intense due to warmer seas. Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology says that the economic cost of natural disasters like floods, cyclones, and droughts has uh, been increasing and reaching around 3,000 crores annually. This is a lot of money. And this kind of loss as a country, uh, we should try to make efforts to reduce this loss. And water scarcity is, of course, one big problem that is going to come. If you read what's being talked about, scarcity is that in a few years' time, if we do not take action to conserve water, the third world war, if it has to happen, will be around water. Changing rainfall patterns, increasing evaporation due to higher temperatures and depletion of groundwater sources or resources are contributing to water scarcity. By 2050, over 600 million people in this country is going to face water stress. And according to Niti Aayog, the National Institution for Transforming India, says that 21 cities in the country are going to run out of groundwater by 2025, which is just around the corner. Next year, these cities might not have groundwater. And I live in one of these cities and I'm very scared. I am scared that there will be no groundwater, and people still don't understand the gravity, the seriousness of this problem. Yeah. And then there are agricultural losses that was going to happen, and uh, annual agricultural loss will be anywhere between 3 to 4 trillion US dollars by 2030. This is a huge number, and we are talking about India's GDP, which where agriculture contributes to about 17 to 18% of its GDP and employing about 50% of the workforce. We still have a huge population in this country that is dependent on agriculture. And this is all going to go for a toss if we do not take appropriate action now. Now, with that impact and causes that I have shared, it is important that we understand there are two elements to climate change. If you want to address it, it is called adaptation and mitigation. Moving on to the next slide. Uh, so there are multiple impacts, and greenhouse gases are emitted as a result of anthropogenic activities, for example, urbanization, transportation, and then the impacts, as I have already said, there's increased risk of adverse health impacts, global warming, then there's biodiversity loss. I'm sure you must have heard and read that we've lost uh, almost like 30% of biodiversity uh, now, or is at the verge of becoming extinct in this country and elsewhere. Increase in extreme weather events, economic loss and infrastructure loss, and increase in intensity and frequency of natural disasters. Now, there are two things that one could possibly do. One is mitigation. What does mitigation mean? It means reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Either you reduce greenhouse gas emissions at source, that is, instead of using, when I say reducing emissions at source, it is like tax deduction at source that happens, right? Even before you get your salary, taxes deducted. It happens right at the source. And I always give this corollary because it is easy to understand. So uh, when I say uh, emission reduction at source, I mean, for example, instead of using petrol or diesel cars, if one uses electric vehicles, there will be emission reductions because fossil fuels have a certain emission factor. Whereas if the electricity is used for these vehicles, the emission factor is much less. As a result, your emissions is going to go down. But there might be other associated problems which we still do not know. Electric vehicles come with batteries, and what do you do with those batteries? And I think the global community is thinking about it. So mitigation is about reducing greenhouse gases at source or sequestering greenhouse gases. So there are greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Sequestration can happen either through carbon capture and storage mechanisms or through forestry, agroforestry, such or activities. Whereas adaptation is where you know what are the measures that we as a community should take to reduce the impact of climate change. So for example, uh, livelihood diversification of farmers will improve their adaptive capacity to deal with uh, higher temperatures or even erratic rainfall, because then that farmer will have more resources and will not solely depend on agricultural yield. So adaptation measures are more from the perspective of reducing the impact of the climate change, whereas mitigation is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, which leads to climate change. Moving on to the next slide. Yeah, so adaptation, as I said, is adjustment in response to climate impacts. That is, climate change has happened, and now what do you do in order to uh, deal with it? Now, this means build, for example, there are some examples: building resilience of forest to forest fires, developing drought tolerant crops. I think there is a lot of research going on where as a country and the global community is coming up with drought tolerant crops, increase water use efficiency. How do you ensure that not just conserve, how do you ensure that you conserve water and improve the water use efficiency, update building codes for extreme weather, build flood defenses? These are responses to climate change impacts, and that is called adaptation. Whereas mitigation, as I said, reduces the sources or enhances the sinks of greenhouse gases. For example, afforestation activities, using cleaner energy, installing energy efficient devices, maybe even dietary changes. I think a lot of people question this quite a bit, but if you look into the math of how much emissions happen as a result of poultry or other non-vegetarian food in comparison to vegetarian food, that also leads to a lot of emission reductions that can possibly happen, and this leads to mitigation. So there are two elements to it. Adaptation, one has to understand, it is adjustment in response to climate change impacts, whereas mitigation is reducing greenhouse gases, both uh, at the source or even increasing the sinks of greenhouse gases. These are the two elements to it. Moving on to the next slide. As I said, I think this is repetitive, so I'll move to the next slide, please. Yeah, and after looking at these elements, one has to understand that India as a country is doing quite a bit, no? And I must say that India, though we are uh, one of the developing countries in the world, we were the first country globally to come up with what is called National Action Plan on Climate Change, NAPCC. This was launched in 2010, and it includes various missions: mission on solar energy, energy efficiency, sustainable agriculture, and eco restoration. There were total, I think, if I'm right, 9 missions. Two of them were considered mitigation missions, which is on National Solar Mission and National Mission on Energy Efficiency. And there were 5 adaptation missions, which were on agriculture, water, uh, Green India Mission, which was on eco restoration, and so on and so forth. Then there was a renewable energy initiative, which the government of India has, which has a target of achieving 500 gigawatt of non-fossil fuel energy capacity by 2030. And I'm very happy to inform that this, uh, I think we are well on, yeah, we are on in a we are on track to achieve this target, hopefully soon. Uh, National Action Plan on Climate Change led to what is called state action plans on climate change. Every state uh, has a state action plan on climate change, which talks about state level strategies to address localized climate impacts. Madhya Pradesh also has a state action plan on climate change. And I'm happy to also inform that GIZ supported development of 17 of these state action plans in the country. And then there is a Paris Agreement, where the government of India actually came up with what is called nationally determined contribution, which talks about reducing its emissions intensity by 33 to 35% by 2030. And then the government of India has also very recently announced a net zero target, which is we as a country need to reach a net zero by 2070. Moving on to the next slide, uh, it's important to note that the government of India at the Paris Agreement made significant pledges to address climate change. As I said, it aims to reduce its emissions intensity of its GDP by 33 to 35% from 2005 levels by 2030. Based on the report that the government of India has been submitting to the United Nations Framework Convention, they have already achieved 33% of this target, and I think very soon we'll achieve this target. And then it also said that achieve 50% of cumulative electric power installed capacity from fossil fuel based energy sources by 2030, and we had already achieved 38% by October 2022. So we are very well on track to achieve that target as well, and enhance renewable energy capacity to 500 gigawatt by 2030. One goal which is extremely difficult for the country is the afforestation goal. And I don't want to call it afforestation goal. It talks about creating an additional carbon sink of 2.5 to 3 billion tons from additional forest and tree cover by 2030. Now, that's a huge target. And this target, I'm I I have done my math. India will have to really put in a lot of effort. All the states will have to come together to do this, and then also I think we will fall short in achieving this target. I think so. That's my opinion. But of course, the government of India has come up with strategies at various levels. They came up with a technical information series report which was launched by the Forest Survey of India, and it said that we are well on track to achieving this target as well. And then there was an adaptation and resilience target which talked about investment in climate resilient agriculture and water resource management, but it was it was a target which is qualitative target, not a quantitative target. So I don't think there is much to talk about this adaptation and resilience target in India's NDC commitments. India also came up with what is called a net zero target. They have milestones leading to net zero. So they said that they should reach a net zero emissions by 2070. And as I said, by 2022, they have already achieved 40% of installed capacity from fossil fuel sources, only 8 years ahead of the target. So 2030, they will reach the energy capacity target increase to 50%. And 2047, they aim to decarbonize as part of India's centenary independence. So, of course, the government of India we as a country, we are very good at making announcements, no? So, and we've made and we are aiming that by 2047, which will be 100 years of independence, we want to decarbonize. But that's a very difficult target. India needs to do a lot to decarbonize, and the sectoral focus is primarily on power sector, transport sector, and industry. And both public sector enterprises as well as private sector enterprises need to work together with the government of India in order to help India decarbonize, if at all, by 2047. Moving on to the next slide, I wanted to come to forests and climate change. I think it's important to talk about forests from the climate change perspective, because we as a country, we always talk about forests from biomass perspective as well as carbon sequestration perspective, but it is a lot more than that. It plays a crucial role in regulating the climate by acting as carbon sinks, and it supports biodiversity and maintaining water cycles. The relationship between forests and climate change is dynamic, mitigating climate impacts as well as supporting ecosystem services. A lot of ecosystem services that we receive these days, it's primarily because of the forest and tree cover that we have in this country. And I'm very happy to inform the August gathering here that in spite of the huge pressure that we have on forests, uh, our country has been able to show a positive trend in forest and tree cover over the last decade. And we are one of the 10 countries in the world that has shown a positive trend in forest and tree cover. Uh, Forests are both solution and a victim of climate change. By protecting and restoring forests, India and other nations can address climate change while safeguarding biodiversity, livelihoods, and vital ecosystem services. Moving on, and why did I talk about forest and climate change? Can we move to the next slide, please? I specifically wanted to talk about this topic called forest landscape restoration. I think it is important that we understand that we are talking about a landscape approach. It is a process, not the objective or goal. We are talking about a landscape. A landscape might have multiple land uses, with forests being just a portion of the entire landscape. The landscape might have agricultural land, forests, water bodies. So we are talking about the whole landscape approach. And it is usually defined as a process to regain ecological integrity and human well-being in a deforested and degraded landscapes. Degraded landscapes. And I think I will. It is it is important from a perspective of moving on to the next slide. Yes. Uh, yes, the relevance. Yes, Dr. Jagwani, can you please hold here? Forest landscape restoration has a huge uh, relevance. In the last 5 to 10 years, forest landscape restoration has been receiving a lot of attention, primarily because of the fact that it can address the triple crisis of the climate, the environmental pollution, and biodiversity loss. Also, the fact that the three United Nations Convention and the international initiatives like the UN Decade of Ecosystem Restoration, Bond Challenge, and Montreal Biodiversity Framework all consider FLR, that is forest landscape restoration, as a key component in achieving its goals. Also, yeah, and I was talking about this. Can we move to the next slide? Uh, I was talking about this from the perspective of the fact that I am leading one of the projects in the country, which is called Restore, Conserve, and Protect Forest and Tree Cover for NDC implementation in India. Now, this is a very big title of the project. As a result, we came up with an acronym called RECAP for NDC. This project is an Indo-German bilateral cooperation project. It's a project between the government of Germany and government of India. The project is being implemented in 4 geographies in the country: Uttarakhand, Gujarat, Maharashtra, and Delhi NCR. Moving on to the next slide. This project primarily works on forest landscape restoration and piloting new models in forestry, including in urban areas. This project is supported by the German Federal Ministry for the Environment, which is called BMUB. The political partner for this project in this country is Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, and implementing partners at the state level is state forest departments. The project is led by GIZ. However, there are 5 other consortium partners, that is TERI, IUCN India, Forest Survey of India, ICMOD, that is International Center for Integrated Mountain Development, and ICFRE, that is Indian Council of Forestry Research and Education. It's a 6-year project from 2023 to 29, and the project intends to work on the fact that stakeholders at national, regional, and local levels derive ecological, socio-economic, governance, and climate change related benefits from forest landscape restoration. And in order to achieve this outcome, there are 5 outputs that the project will deliver. Output one is on model approaches for FLR and trees outside forest is implemented in selected landscapes. Um across the four states that I talked about, that is Uttarakhand, Gujarat, Maharashtra, and Delhi NCR. Output two is about setting up of integrated systems of monitoring and evaluation. For the longest period of time, we as a country have been talking about forests from the perspective of carbon stock and biomass stock, but no one talks about ecological and socio-economic benefits that accrue from forest and tree cover. That's what the project is going to do, and this will be done via the Forest Survey of India. Output three is about models and tools for financing forest landscape restoration, which looks at leveraging finance from public and private sector sources as well as international sources. Output four is about policies and guidelines for FLR, which is which can be anchored into local level developmental planning processes. And output five is about capacity development, knowledge management, and communication. And this project was was launched by our Honorable Environment Minister, Mr. Bhupinder Yadav, and the Honorable Environment Minister from Germany, Ms. Steffi Lemke, in 2023 at the G20 event in Chennai. So this is a project that I'm leading, and I wanted to end my input with this slide. Thank you so much. Happy to respond to questions if there are any.
Thank you so much, sir, for a wonderful session upon the efforts which India is putting in for reducing the climate change, especially the recap for NDC project which you enlightened us. You have been putting a lot of effort for bringing up India in the international agendas. Thank you so much, sir. And we are really happy that you could find out time out of your busy schedule and enlighten us today. Participants, if you want to interact with sir, you can unmute your mic or you can also type in the chat box. Sir, indeed, it was a wonderful and enlightening talk by you. And it was so mesmerizing that really we don't wish to leave you at this point of time. But
So
somehow
Devanshi, I
we
have
have
a
to.
question for sir. Just
Yes,
one
sir,
quick
please.
question. So I think
Sure, sir.
very nice presentation and a lot of good things that you have told. I just have one question. So the way the climate change is happening and way this temperature is going up, it may end up, we say 2 degrees, it may end up 4 or 5 degrees. If that happens, what will happen to Chennai? What will happen to Mumbai? What will happen to parts of Kerala? What's your anticipation if it actually happens to go till 5 degrees? What will happen by the end of the century?
Thank you so much for bringing that up, bringing this up. No, and I already said that IPCC's sixth assessment report, which was released in 2021-22, already says that some of these cities, as you mentioned, Mumbai, Chennai, uh, Trivandrum, Calcutta, portions of these cities will get submerged by the end of the century. Submerged because the average, I'm talking about average sea level rise in India is going to happen from 40 to 63 centimeters. It sounds very little. It sounds very little, but this this is going to have significant impact on these cities because we as a country have one of the longest coastlines in the world. We are talking about 7,500 kilometers. Also, not just these large cities, we have huge population living all along the coastline. All of them will move into the inland areas, and there will be way more uh, pressure on uh, areas which is far away from these coastline because populations will move. And honestly, my personal opinion, I think I don't know how many of us will be there to witness it, but uh, there is going to be huge sub uh, uh, a lot of areas will get completely submerged and we will lose a lot of land as a country. I don't know if you've observed Maldives and other small island states negotiate at the international fora only about this. We will vanish in a few years. Yeah, those small island states, which are very small and are in the middle of an ocean, they will all vanish. They will vanish. And it will happen. They are already reducing in size. This will happen with Calcutta. This will happen with Mumbai. Uh, and yeah, it's not a very good situation to be in.
So, any other participant, you can come forward and have an interactive session with sir, or you can also type in the chat box. So, thank you so much, sir. I cannot see any other response. So, I would like to appreciate with full gratitude to you that you could manage time and you are present here with us today. And really, there are no words of appreciation left which could express my gratitude for you. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for inviting me. And if there are questions that participants come up with, please feel free to reach out to me. I would be happy to respond to them, even if it is via email. Thank you so much for inviting me. I look forward to engaging with you in future. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a good day, sir.
You too.
So we have successfully completed the faculty development program, which was scheduled for 6 days. This development program upon risk to resilience, resilient innovative strategies for mitigating climate change. And we started on 16th December with inauguration of the FDP at 6 p.m., followed by the first session by Dr. Manoj Kumar Mani Chaturvedi, a distinguished expert from the Environmental and Sustainability Division at Qatar Design Consortium, who delivered an insightful talk on the multifaceted challenges of climate change and path towards sustainability. His session covered the scientific basis of climate change impacts, technological innovations, and global responses to tackle environmental crisis, highlighting the role of individuals and communities. Followed by session 2, which was by Dr. Ravindra Kumar Gautam, Raja Jwala Prasad Postdoctoral Fellow at the Institution of Eminence, Banaras Hindu University, Varanasi. Environmental pollution assessment along with climate change was addressed by him. He very well explained the concepts related to environmental pollution assessment. On the next day, at session 3, we discussed climate change mitigation by Dr. Nitin Goyal, a distinguished principal scientist and chair, CSIR NERI from Mumbai, who enlightened us over sustainable transport in Mumbai region. Followed by session 4, which was on sustainability assessment by Dr. Balendu Shekargiri, who is an accomplished assistant professor senior scale in the sustainability cluster of the School of Engineering at University of Petroleum and Energy Studies, Dehradun. He spoke to us about green initiatives like Biochar and Biojagat. On session 5, we discussed GIS applications for climate change impact assessment by Mr. Amit Anand, who is a GIS professional manager, climate resilience and disaster risk reduction at PricewaterhouseCoopers Limited, where he enlightened us on hazard risk modeling, geospatial analysis, flood modeling, project management, and he also built a lot of our capacity. On session 6, we were enlightened by Dr. Ajay Vikram Ahirwar on environmental and health impacts assessment. Dr. Ajay Vikram Ahirwar is an esteemed academician and environmental researcher, currently serving as an associate professor in the Civil Engineering Department at the National Institute of Technology, Raipur, Chhattisgarh. He enlightened us over environmental impacts assessment studies for sustainable development and climate change mitigation. In session 7, we were enlightened by Dr. Ajanta Goswami, who is a distinguished academic and researcher with expertise in remote sensing applications, particularly in glaciology, cryospheric studies, urban heat islands, landslides, and geohazards. He brought to our notice the significance of cryospheric studies. In session 8, by Dr. Gaurav Chauhan, who is an accomplished academician and geoscience expert, currently serving as an assistant professor at KSKV Kutch University, Bhuj. He previously also worked as a senior geologist in the government. He enlightened us and discussed about observations and case studies regarding remote sensing for neotectonic study. In session 9, Dr. Sonam Palia, who is working as a postdoctoral fellow at the Alexander von Humboldt RWTH Aachen University, Germany. She spoke to us about the contaminants of emerging concern and sustainable remediation strategies. In the next session, followed session 10 by Dr. Ashutosh Mandape, who is an assistant professor in the Civil Engineering Department at Indian Institute of Technology, Indore. He discussed upon air quality and its related climate change impacts. In session 11 today by Dr. Subramaniam Karupanan, which was on environmental impact assessment and sustainable environmental management. Sir is a highly accomplished expert working in environmental health and safety over 35 years of experience spanning in government service, academia, industry, and consultancy. He is presently working with the Environmental Health and Safety Department at Malaysian University. He enlightened us about the procedures that are adopted internationally for environmental health impact and sustainable environmental management. Followed by session 12 by scientist Saurabh Sakre, who is working as a senior scientist in the CSIR NIST, National Institute for Interdisciplinary Science and Technology, under the Ministry of Science and Technology, Government of India. He very well explained the basics and applications of remote sensing and GIS with impactful case studies. And in the final session, which was by Mr. Kundan Kumar Burnwal, who is a working professional in the climate change mitigation policy with over 15 years of extensive expertise in development, implementation, and evaluation of projects related to forestry, climate change, carbon markets, measurement, reporting, verification, and sustainability. He delved into concerns and policies related to climate change and also demonstrated the actions which India is taking regarding mitigation of the climate change. With this, we have completed the 6 days of our faculty development program, and I now request Swati Srivastava madam to to address the audience with the vote of thanks. And also, if you would like to have any feedback, please you can switch on your cameras and directly provide us the feedback.
Thank you, ma'am. We are very thankful to AICT ATAL for sponsoring us to conduct this FDP. We would like to thank our President Architect Achal Chaudhary sir, Principal of IPS Academy, IES Indore, Dr. Archana Kirti Chaudhary Madam, and HOD and Dean R&D Dr. Amit Sharma sir for providing all the facilities to conduct the FDP. All the deans and head of departments for their untiring support. Our e-learning center head of department Dr. Sanjay Gupta sir and our prominent member Jinendra sir, Akash sir, Narayan sir and Himanshu sir, who are backbone for organizing the whole faculty development program very smoothly in e-learning platform. Supporting faculty members Dr. Harish Dwivedi sir, Dr. Naseem sir, Praveen Devra sir, Arpit Sethia sir, Prajwal Chauhan sir, Divakar sir, Parag Dongre sir, Sandeep Sharma sir, and Harshit Jain sir. And every time point to point connected Dr. Lalitesh Sinha sir. Thank you everyone for hassle-free and smooth conduction of online FDP. I'm very thankful to Dr. Devanshi Jagwani madam and all the eminent speakers for sharing their work and experience with all of us, to all the faculties and staff of Civil Engineering Department, and finally to all the participants. Without them, it is not possible to conduct the FDP. Finally, to all those peoples who are directly and indirectly involved in the conduction of this FDP. One thought comes in my mind: learning never exhausts the active minds. I hope and pray this is not the end, but the beginning of bond between all of us. And this FDP will open the gates of new research in the field of the climate change mitigation. Thank you. Thank you so much. Any participant, he or she would like to give any feedback?
Yes, Dr. Swati, I think first of all, thank you very much, Dr. Devanshi, for an excellent FTP. Lot of very thought-provoking lectures. Geology 1, climate change, GIS, I mean, name it. A lot of very good things, and they are, I mean, of course, very relevant to us. It's not only it is about knowledge, but it also tells us that we are living in an era which can be dangerous. So I think thank you very much, and I'm sure this will foster the learning and also
Yes,
foster
sir.
the more research on this. So once again, thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Yes, this is Dr. Rajshri Kamath from NIT Bhopal, and I thank Dr. Devanshi madam for such an interesting FDP. And I hope I'm audible.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
I was wondering whether I was. A second. I was.
You're audible, madam.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank
So
you.
all the lectures and all the lectures and the conduction of the lectures and just everything had been amazing and interesting. And I congratulate the team that was associated with the Devanshi ma'am. Good evening and all the best to all for assessments now.
Thank you so much. If anybody would like to provide
Good
us
evening,
for
ma'am.
improvements.
Good evening, ma'am. I'm from TDC Landra as a faculty in management. Even I'm not from this background, but I feel it was very interesting and some new facts and figures are there. To as you have given so much of sessions, so many sessions regarding climate change. There's a lot of awareness, and I feel so great to attend this FDP on behalf of my institution and on behalf of myself. I thank you for the lovely sessions. Thank you so much, ma'am, and all
Thank you,
the
ma'am.
supporting people who are behind all this 5 or 6 days FDP. Sorry. Yes. Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Good evening.
Thank you so much, madam. Definitely a lot of efforts for organize such sort of FDPs. And the motivation behind this is like participants like you who are energetic and active.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Any improvements or changes we should suggest?
I'm Ashik Hussain from Jammu and Kashmir, especially from the Srinagar. It is too cold here. It is -9 right now. Thank you for providing an opportunity to participate in this program. It has been very informative, and I am from this background, that is the disaster management. I am pursuing a PhD in disaster management from University of Kashmir. So this proved to be very fruitful, inshallah, in my next these assignments also. I really appreciate the efforts you have been taken in conducting this program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Participants, please suggest any improvements.
Good evening, ma'am. I am Dr. V.R. Shankar Chila. So I work in the domain of sustainability and circular economy. Although a lot of activities which are there, like the lectures which are there are more focused on certain themes and topics which are covering on EIA, GIS, etc. Like I would also love to listen from the AI integration in the future sessions. So that is something which is very important in driving climate change and climate crisis. That's one area which can be included in the next upcoming lectures or workshops that you do. And the second one would be climatics. So how each and every domain, because climate crisis cannot be solved by a single domain or specificity. The one more arena would be like climate economics, biomimicry, like try to see the models how that can get integrated with different branches. So that then it would be a very good reach for us. So this would add much more value to the discussions in the future scenarios. And Indian climate dialogue will certainly set its tone when we start integrating multiple branches and like transdisciplinary can be also one of the choices. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much,
Thank you,
sir.
sir.
We will definitely look into adding the suggestions which you have provided to us. Any of the participants, you can come forward and give us your responses. So the feedback forms are available into the ATAL portal, which will be open to you once we upload the assessment marks along with your attendance. And when you provide the feedback, then only the certificate will be generated. So we'll be floating the link for the assessment form right now into the WhatsApp group. You have to attempt it within the next 1 hour or so. And once you're done with that, we'll be uploading your assessment marks along with attendance, and then the portal will be open to you for the feedback along with the certificate generation. So, hoping that you could manage time into the coming assessment duration which is being given to you. In case if you have any issues, please let me know, and we are happy to assist you and provide you the support which is required.
Excuse me, ma'am. What duration you said at that time? Some voice cut was there.
Ma'am, around 1 hour you will be provided for attempting the MCQ quiz.
Oh, okay. Okay. How many questions?
Around 40 questions, madam.
Okay.
Those are simple MCQs which are based
So
upon the
we have
session.
portal.
Ma'am, it will be a Google form which is simple MCQs which are
So
based
we
upon the sessions. The sessions which we are organized, it's based upon that only. These are simple MCQ questions, very easily answerable by those who have all attended. So any other support? Ma'am, your voice is breaking, ma'am. Ma'am, your voice is breaking. We are unable to hear you. Sorry, ma'am, your voice is breaking. We are unable to hear you. So thank you so much from all of us, the team over here, and we look forward to seeing you somewhere in future again. Thank you so much for your feedback, patient listening, and your attentiveness. We see you
Will it
from
be
here.
available? How do we it will be available on the ATAL portal? The assessment.
Ma'am, I will have to upload the assessment marks on ATAL portal, but I am sending you a Google form link which you have to attempt.
Acha, link you are sending, which we will be
Yes,
attending.
ma'am.
Okay, fine. I
So,
understood. I
sharing a
had that
Google form
question
link.
only.
I'll be sharing a
Okay.
Google form link upon the group, and you are giving time for
Okay.
attempting that. And then your assessment marks and attendance both will be feeded on the ATAL portal. After
Okay,
which you
fine.
can do the feedback and you can generate the certificate.
Okay. Understood. Thank you.
Thank you so much, madam. Thank you, all the participants. Seeing you off from here. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.